They're going to age out of this bill. And then do they have the character to handle in a mature way, understanding what is right and wrong, what's healthy, unhealthy? Will they know how to say no to things? And even if they are canceled by an organization or a peer group, is that okay with them because they've chosen to put truth first?
So last week, the U.S. Senate overwhelmingly passed the Kids Online Safety Act. It's a historic piece of legislation really designed to protect kids on the internet. But should we be looking to the government to do this? Is that healthy for us to look to the government for additional protection, like especially with these kinds of things, calling social media companies to have certain restrictions for our children, and the restrictions are really designed by lawmakers? Or should we as parents be more really engaged with, I would say, maybe the dangerous things of life and really guiding our kids ourselves? For some of us, this leads us to a dark place, but today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, Dr. Kathy has some really important insights for us and will help us think well on this topic. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark, be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, the last time that Congress passed a law to protect children on the internet, it was in 1998. Now, that's before Facebook and before the iPhone and long before today's oldest teenagers were even born. Now, there's a bill that's aiming to protect kids from the harms of different things like social media and gaming sites and other online platforms that really is having enough bipartisan support to actually pass. Now, supporters of the Kids Online Safety Act, it's KOSA for short, include parents groups and children advocacy organizations, as well as many companies like Microsoft and X, formerly known as Twitter, and Snapchat. They say that the bill is a necessary first step in regulating tech companies and requiring them to protect children from dangerous online content and take responsibility for the harms that their platforms can cause. Opponents, however, of the KOSA bill would say that it would violate the First Amendment and harm vulnerable kids who wouldn't otherwise have access to information on different topics, specifically LGBTQ topics and issues, or other reproductive right topics. Although the bill has been revised to address many of the concerns, and major LGBTQ plus groups have decided to support the legislation, there's still some concern over it. Now, if the bill passes, KOSA will create a quote-unquote duty of care. It's a legal term that requires companies to take reasonable steps to prevent harm for online platforms that minors will likely use. They'll also be required to prevent and mitigate harms to children, including things like bullying and violence, the promotion of things like suicide and eating disorders, substance abuse, and sexual exploitations, along with advertisements for illegal products like narcotics, tobacco, and alcohol would also be regulated. Social media platforms would also have to provide minors with actions to protect their information, disable addictive product features, and opt out of personalized algorithmic recommendations. They would also be required to limit the other users from communicating with children and limit features that quote, increase, sustain, and extend the use of the platform. Things like autoplay for videos or platform rewards. In general, online platforms would have to default to the safest settings possible for accounts it believes belong to minors. Dr. Kathy, what are your thoughts on this bill?
Part of me wants to say it's about time. I am happy to see some of the companies who are supporting it. Not at all surprised to see that the LGBTQIA plus community is against it because they want access to our children at all costs. As I've often said on the podcast, there is a part of me that wishes it wasn't necessary because parents were parenting their children in light of devices and the platforms they allow their children to have access to. However, as fast as things change, as crazy as it is, and things like parents and educators can't possibly understand all the algorithms, I think I'm in favor of this. Part of me wishes the government would get out of our business. And in this case, bipartisan support is encouraging. I think from what you've told me, I think I'm in favor of this.
Now, when we look at the objectives of this bill, it's natural for us to, I would say, get behind it, right? We care about the safety of kids. And we also understand the dynamics of what it looks like to be, I would say, maybe like an online citizen for our kids to live in this world. And also the reality that there's a lot of things that happen inside of this world that really inhibit or, I don't know, interfere with kids' natural development and I would say even identity formation. I want to ask you, when we look at some of those topics that are inside of this bill, what do we need to know about how kids mature and grow and maybe even build their understanding of how they exercise themselves and their identity in the world? How does these objectives engage that? And what should we be mindful as kids are growing, especially in a digital world, of where they get the opportunity to, I don't know, I don't want to say experience risky things, but I do think that some of these things are, realities that maybe kids need to be, I don't want to say exposed to, but at least think about. What are your thoughts with some of that? How do kids develop and grow? And what's in this bill that we need to be mindful of that speak to that? And should we be promoting, I don't know, bubble wrapping our kids and giving them the internet on training wheels?
Yeah, that's so good because, well, no, the answer to that is no. That's why I wrote the book Resilient Kids, that if you overprotect kids, they become fragile and they'll never leave your side and they won't trust themselves to make decisions. They'll be quickly and easily hurt. They will expect to be hurt and it just changes everything. So we don't bubble wrap kids, but we also have a responsibility to, at the right time, in the right way, teach discernment, and that's one of the things that is probably lacking here. I think kids, if I look back on my life, I think kids have always wanted to be cool. Right. I think I wanted to be cool when I was a kid. So I didn't want to wear certain things. And, I would only play on the playground equipment that was considered to be cool. Maybe I didn't let everybody know that I took dance classes on Friday afternoon because some of the kids didn't think that was cool. So being cool, being popular, being well thought of by the peer group has also always been a significant desire, maybe even a need. And I think that's true for adults as well, which is why we have to make sure that we have the right standard or we get sucked into the muck of the culture like anybody else. So that would be a factor here. I do think we have to prevent them from learning more about suicide, eating disorders, substance abuse, sexual exploitation, illegal products, et cetera, et cetera. What I would say, Wayne, is what's the opposite of that? Like, wouldn't it be really cool if platforms that present creativity and platforms that talk about progress over perfection and platforms that talk about, healthy eating and platforms that teach children in age appropriate ways why sleep is so important? What if we amplified and celebrated those? So what if we decreased the algorithm? Like, I love the fact that this bill would prevent autoplay on videos and platform rewards. That's brilliant. Because right now, like, you're stuck. The next video that comes up, it's just dangerous. So the opposite would be, again, promoting healthy belief systems for the younger generation. I think that would be remarkable.
Yeah, I do too, Dr. Kathy. I do think that there are some of those little features in here that are actually exciting because it reduces the addictive nature, I think, of what we find to be happening with social media. It almost makes me say, how do I register myself as a kid so that I could now have these restrictions on my social media account, right? Because I think that this is actually a safer place that I would like to be too. But I wanted to ask you this a little bit as we close out here today. What isn't in this bill that you think that parents should really be doing at home? I know that you said that most of the things in here are things that parents should naturally be doing already. What isn't here that you think that parents need to be mindful of that we should really be doing at home?
It would be the teaching of, why is this a good thing? If this bill passes, why are you glad that it's passed? Why is autoplay dangerous? Why is access to anybody on the internet dangerous? Because, again, they're going to leave our home one day. And they're going to age out of this bill. And then do they have the character to handle in a mature way, understanding what is right and wrong, what's healthy and unhealthy? Will they know how to say no to things? And even if they are canceled by an organization or a peer group, is that okay with them because they've chosen to put truth first? So I think we teach through the modeling and through the teaching with our words what we would want, how we would want them to behave. whether this bill ever passed. That's what's missing, is the teaching of how your heart should be engaged. Do you know who you are and who you're capable of becoming? And do you want more for your life, which means that you will not engage with trash, but you will seek out the truth, which transforms.
As Dr. Kathy was talking, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of Deuteronomy chapter 7, and I'll begin reading at verse 1. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that you're entering to possess and drives out before you many nations, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, Jebusites, 7 nations that are larger and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, then you may destroy them totally. Don't make a treaty with them and don't show them mercy. Don't intermarry with them, and don't give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods, and the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you. I don't want to go all hellfire and brimstone on us today as we close out, but I do think that there's an interesting dynamic of what God does to the nation of Israel in Deuteronomy 7. The promised land was a land that was unimaginable. It was flourishing. It had so many different things it offered, and the Lord opens it up to the nation of Israel because of the wickedness, the way that the other nations had really, I would say, had their view of God stunted. And they started to see the world from a different perspective. So the way that God calls the nation of Israel to live and inhabit that place is a way that they wouldn't lose their understanding, their perspective, really the truth, that God is the one who has provided this for them. And the interesting thing that God says to the nation of Israel in Deuteronomy is that if they don't stay on their guard against these nations and the way the nations think, the children will be turned away to follow and serve other gods. And the Lord's anger will burn against them and destroy them. I think it's interesting that God says your children will turn away. How incredibly important is it to the Lord that our children know and understand who He is? And, I think that that's an encouragement for us today as we go on with our lives. Our calling in life is very similar to the one in Deuteronomy, to honor the Lord, to serve Him, and to do faithful things with what He's given us to do. And in that, to guide our kids to follow in the same way. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark. As an aside, we just launched a new online course at our website. This course is about awakening the smarts, which is incredibly important as we are right around the corner for starting up a new school year. This course will guide you to engage your kids to really develop and love learning. You can find out more about this at celebratekids.com. Again, that's celebratekids.com. Thanks so much for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast. We're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.